Greetings, beloved divine diamond light, Lord and Lordettes of infinite love. Rise consciousness shift here with a video. Today, I'm discussing the Knights Templar, like the early stages of the group and the network of those that want to control the world and use their magic and their knowledge in order to manipulate and have power and control over others, well, the rest of the world basically. Yeah, basically I have this book. I'm going to read a little bit of it. This is still dealing with the religious aspect of how they have controlled people. So this book is done by Dan Jones and it's called Crusaders, and it says at the bottom, an epic history of the wars for the Holy Land. So this is talking about the Crusades, when you could say that the Muslims and Christians are fighting over territories and lands and stuff. But as like, use your discernment as always. And what I know is that Muslims, and I would say this ties into the Moors and stuff, the Moors had control over certain aspects of Europe and things like that, and then they were basically the educators of Europe, and then basically, according to my research, some of their magic kind of got kind of leaked out, or they taught some of these people some of the science and stuff, and then once they got the knowledge of the Moorish science and stuff, they decided to use it to start conquering and taking out some of the Muslims in order to establish their power, basically. So that's a little brief history. Do your own research on that. But yeah, from like the 600s to like the 1300s, yeah, basically the Moors and the Muslim type of movement was prominent, and they had their own science. But yeah, enough of that. Let me get into this. Just read up on this and explain what I wanted to share. Let's get into it. So I'm just gonna read a bit of the introduction and then go on from explaining there, and then I'll try and add some other details from some documentaries that I have to fill in some of my views, just to add to this content. So the introduction, it goes, shortly before Easter in the year 1188, an English Archbishop of Canterbury went to Wales on the recruitment drive. Thousands of miles away, war had broken out in the eastern Mediterranean, and the Archbishop, whose name was Baldwin of Ford, had been tasked with recruiting several thousand able-bodied fighting men to join an army that was being deployed there. So 1188, an archbishop went to Wales because a war has broken out thousands of miles away, and he is out recruiting able-bodied fighting men to join an army. Yeah, and this is basically a religious leader, like an archbishop. This is to do with the church. So the church is going around looking for able, but some fighters. They're looking for fighters to recruit to send them to war. All right, just to break it down. It was, on the face of it, not an easy assignment. For those who decided to join up, the journey by land and sea to the east and back would take at least 18 months. So, a year is 12 months, so 18, that's a year and a half. It would take at least a year and a half to travel there and come back. And they're going over there to fight war. So, it would cost a lot of money. There was a high chance of shipwreck, robbery, ambush, or death from disease long before the destination. The Christian kingdom of Jerusalem in Palestine was ever reached. Oh, sorry. Let me read that again, because that came out funny. There was a high chance of shipwreck, robbery, ambush, or death from disease long before the destination, the Christian kingdom of Jerusalem in Palestine. That's the destination, was ever reached. So before they get to the Christian kingdom of Jerusalem in Palestine, there's a high chance of shipwreck, robbery, and all of these things to happen before they even reach. The chances of coming home with much in the way of plunder were negligible. Indeed, the prospect of coming home at all was dauntingly slim. So, you're going out to war, and it's not likely for you to even make it back. You're just going over there with very high risk that something bad can happen before you even reach the place of where the battle is taking place. And for even to get back home after the war is very slim, and is over a year and a half that you are dedicating to this mission. The enemy commander, the Kurdish Sultan of Egypt and Syria, Salah al-Din Yusuf ibn Ayyub, colloquially called Saladin, was highly capable and had already inflicted a series of devastating defeats on armies of the Western Christians, generically known as the Franks. So the Franks were the Western Christians, and Saladin has been defeating them. The previous summer, he had crushed a huge army in the field, imprisoned the king of Jerusalem, seized the holy relic of Christ's cross. So they've kept the cross of the Christ. And this is like roughly around 1200 years after Christ has well, I would say after the crucifixion, but the real Christ was brought back to life. But they kept the cross as a holy relic, like the actual cross where they tortured and killed him is somewhat holy. But if you know that the religious leaders that killed him, like, yeah, basically this video is going to be a little bit long, but the place where they killed the instruments that was used to kill the Christ shouldn't be classed as holy if you've got any like sense. It's the religious people trying to make something out of their wickedness, basically, and make it seem holy. That's my opinion, anyway. Take it or leave it. The previous summer had crushed. Read that. So a previous summer he had crushed a huge army in the field, imprisoned the king of Jerusalem, seized the holy relic of Christ's cross, and evicted a Christian government from the city of Jerusalem.
11th century Europe was ruled by the church, which held a firm grip on the hearts and minds of the people. This power enabled Pope Urban II to wage war on the Muslim Caliphate and crusade in what he called a War of the Cross to recapture the land of Jerusalem. It had been under Muslim rule since the year 637, but in 1099 this rule was brought to a bloody and sudden end. In the name of the cross, women were raped and murdered. Children were put to the sword, and it is said that blood ran in the streets knee-high to the horses. Out of this land of bloodshed and terror, a group of men arose. Men that would stop at nothing to get what they wanted, no matter what the cost. 20 years after Jerusalem was taken, the Dome of the Rock was seized by a group of warrior monks calling themselves the Knights of the Temple of Solomon, or more simply, the Knights Templars. In Jerusalem, the Templars began to deviate further and further away from the practices of Christianity. They learned the secret arts of the Kabbalah, an ancient form of Jewish magic, along with its dark rites and rituals. The Jews had learned the arts from the pagans of ancient Egypt during the times of enslavement to the Pharaoh, and developed them into Babylon at the time of Nebuchadnezzar. In 1307, King Philip of France arrested them for charges of denial of Christ, homosexuality, and idol worship, as well as magic. In 1314, Pope Clement V declared all Templars as heretics to Christianity, ordering all their properties to be seized. Their leader, Jacques de Molay, was captured and burnt to the stake. The Templars were cornered, and just when it seemed they were finished forever, a glimmer of hope arose from a seemingly certain end. They were to find a safe haven as well as an ally. But not in France. In fact, in a country in a desperate struggle for independence against the English, the country of Scotland.
The only sure reward for participants in the war to take revenge on Saladin would be redeemed in the afterlife. So these people, like, who are likely to be recruited, are going to invest over a year and a half, risk their life to go to this location to fight against the Saladin, and the only reward will be when you die. So this is, you can class it as like slavery. Slaves was the same type of thing, like you work for the master and you believe in God, and then your reward will be after you die. There was no reward for all of the hard work slaves done. They was just enslaved, and it was brainwashed to believe that they're going to get something after life. Well, yeah. So the way you can look at this is that a lot of people that went to war to fight for the church and for these religious leaders were just like slaves. There was no reward. You was not going to get anything from the religious leaders who are probably fighting to take over lands and all of these things and build wealth. You was not going to get anything for it. But you're getting told that God's going to... Oh yeah, let me carry on reading. Yeah, for... The only sure reward for participants in the war to take revenge on Saladin would be redeemed in the afterlife, where it was assumed that God would look favorably on participants, granting them a smoother, swifter entry into paradise. So, this is all to do with the spell of religion. Like, these archbishops are promising people to go out and fight, even though I don't know what the Bible is saying in these times, but the Ten Commandments says thou shalt not kill and love thy neighbor and all of this stuff. But if you go and fight for religion, kill the opposition of religion, then God will look favorably on you. So it's a bit of a contradiction there. But this is all to do with the mind programming. So, yeah, the religious soldiers were victim of magic. This is like Knights Templar magic. They're using people to go and fight, to take over lands, and yeah, basically there's no reward when they capture lands, and when they end up rich and powerful and wealthy for owning and dominating over different people and places and things or whatever, all the soldiers that put in the work fighting only get rewarded after the only sure reward. So anything other than what they said about afterlife is not a sure reward. You're not like it's not no real guarantee. But I'll carry on. There's a part on this, like a little bit further down on this page, that's gonna make you see things a little bit clearer when it comes to the manipulation of the minds. Alright. Although in a religious age obsessed with tallying and remitting sin, this was a more enticing offer than it might seem today. Baldwin, nevertheless, had his work cut out, as he and his entourage slogged through Wales from town to town, preaching, persuading, and whipping up enthusiasm for war against an enemy none of his audience have ever seen, in a land vanishingly few had ever experienced outside their imaginations. So what they're explaining is that he's encouraging people to go and fight someone they don't know, and to go somewhere they don't know. Family, like, this is what supposedly God wants, but hopefully the way I break this down, people can see that religion is not really a movement of righteous and people that are really looking for the betterment of the world. Yeah, the entourage with Archbishop the Baldwin was going around trying to get people to go and fight, go somewhere that they don't really know about, and to fight against someone they never really heard about. They don't know who Saladin is, but the preachers running around, going from town to town, preaching, getting as much people to come. Anyway, let's carry on. In a small town called Abertiefi in West Wales, a young married couple reacted to Baldwin's arrival by having a fight. The husband had decided he wanted to sign up for the crusade. His wife was adamant he was going nowhere. According to the writer Gerald of Wales, who travelled with Archbishop Baldwin and kept a vivid record of the journey, although he sadly omitted the couple's names. So he talks about these people, these couples that had a fight over this crusade. The husband saying he's signing him up to go and fight Saladin. Like, it's got into his head, like, no, this has to be something that I need to do, even though he's married. Like, he's gonna go and fight. He wants to sign up for war. The wife is like, no, you ain't going to fight no war. And yeah, even though this is recorded by Gerald of Wales, no names were taken down. It's just the wife and the husband. The wife, even though the husband, well, I'll get to it. The wife held her husband fast by his cloak and belt and publicly prevented him from going to the archbishop. They struggled and she won. But wrote Gerald, her victory proved horribly short-lived. 3 nights afterwards, she heard a terrible voice saying, "You've taken my servant away from me. Therefore, what you must love shall be taken away from you." That evening, lying in bed, she accidentally rolled over in her sleep and smothered to death her infant son, who was sharing her bed. It was a tragedy, it's written. It was also, she realized, an omen. Although by now Archbishop Baldwin had moved on, the distraught couple went to see their diocesan bishop to report the dreadful accident and beg for forgiveness. I'm gonna start reading there. Oh my goodness. That took me a little bit longer than I wanted, but nonetheless, that's just the intro of the book, and it speaks about an archbishop called Baldwin who going around trying to recruit soldiers to fight in a place that they've never been, to fight someone they don't know. And basically, two couples, this story about the two couples fighting, the woman held onto her husband and stopped him from signing up, and basically God spoke to her in a terrible voice. God spoke to her in a terrible voice, saying that she took his servant and that she would lose what she loved, and she accidentally killed her son. She slept on her son and killed him. It was an infant. Like, for one, these names are not documented, so you don't know who these people are. Did these people even exist? Maybe not. The one thing I'm going to say before I shut down this video is, when it comes to the Knights Templar, especially by the time that they're warring against the Muslims, they know more science, they know magic. And a very one of the main key methods of using magic is to manipulate people's minds with, could be lies or distorted information or any type of information to have a strong effect on how people think and how people see things.
In 18th century France, the majority of the population was very poor, whilst the aristocracy and royalty lived a life of luxury and extravagance. There existed a wide gulf between the two classes. The Freemasons would use this to make the pledge for power, resulting in the biggest upheaval in French history. The Masons took advantage of the growing atmosphere of anger amongst the French and used it to achieve their own aims with a carefully planned propaganda war. They completely controlled the media system and used it to sway the tide of public opinion. The newspapers were geared into calling for the end of the monarchy and the establishment of a society based on liberty, equality, and fraternity. The Masons' vast amounts of wealth were used to influence the political landscape of France. Politicians funded by the Masons promoted the Masonic ideology. The secret lodges of the Masons were open to members of the French army. High-ranking officers and generals were indoctrinated to the Freemasons' way of thinking. With the people, the politicians, and the military of France under Masonic control, the Masons could finally strike.
That story about God telling the woman that she's going to lose what she loves, and then she accidentally kills her child just because she don't want her husband to fight. It says in the Bible, thou shalt not kill. When you go to fight, you go and kill. She is actually abiding by the commandments in the Bible. Whether they was in there at that time or not, I don't know, because the Bible has been changed over the years, believe it or not. But she's abiding by the 10 commandments, thou shalt not kill, love thy neighbor. She's like, yo, you're not going to fight. And then God supposedly says, hey, you took my servant. You was meant to serve me and fight. Rah-de-rah-de-rah. And then she kills her son. Now, the spread of this story is going to create a lot of fear for God. And instead of the woman praying to God for forgiveness, she goes to another archbishop. So the power of forgiveness is not coming from her connection with God. It's coming from another man's connection with God. So she felt like this is just a story. Please use your discernment. I don't want you to actually believe that this thing happened. Just like this book may have stories in there that are fabricated to manipulate. This is like Dan Jones. This is those people. Basically, from the best-selling author of the Templars, Dan Jones. Dan Jones is the best-selling author of the Templars, so he's probably a Templar himself. He's working magic with his books, just like magic is worked with the Bible to manipulate people's mind, telling people stories about God is being upset and then killing people, fam. So you're scared. You have to go to someone who you believe that God likes and ask them to talk to God and say, hey, look out for me, or I'm sorry, forgive me, this, that, and the other. When everybody should have their own connection to God, according to Yeshua's message, ye are gods. The body is a temple of the Spirit of God. So we all have that divine energy inside us. We have the ability to connect to God ourselves. We don't need nobody. But according to these books and these stories, you would believe that you need an archbishop, you need a pastor, you need a preacher, you need someone to help you connect to God in order to be forgiven, so bad things don't happen to you and all of this stuff. It's all magic spells. Please try and recognize that. I'm gonna add some other clips to this to bring more clarity to the history of the Knights Templars, how they know magic and all that stuff. But please understand a very key aspect of magic is mind manipulation by telling stories. The Knights Templars and the Freemasons, they have taken over royal families by spreading rumors, spreading lies, manipulating the news that goes out to the people, and that's a form of magic. So being aware of that, know that some of the stories in the religious books and all of them things there are a part of the magic spell to manipulate minds and have people under control. People went out fighting and killing without even any reward. That's like slavery. You know what I mean? You're going out working and you're not getting any reward. You ain't getting there's no fair exchange. You do something for somebody else and they're saying God's gonna hook you up. Alright? That should be enough. I'm gonna leave it there, family. This video's gone long enough. And yeah, I'm gonna add my other little bits to it. And until the next video, I'm gonna leave y'all in peace, love, oneness, amen, so be it.